I tripped and fell, and I landed on my shoulder. Long story short, I'm going to have that looked at. But where it happened at and the circumstance of it, someone asked me to the point of, are you going to sue? Well, it was my fault that I tripped. I wouldn't even thought of that. But I think a lot of folks in our society today go to that that last step as making it a first step. And so this was what I believe was happening in Corinth. It was very much a Roman dominated society. And so we have, it sounds like there's two believers that have a problem or disagreement. They're fighting, they're whatever it is. And one of them has brought this suit to the civil courts in Corinth. And Paul is aghast and astonished that, it has gotten to this place. Ken.
One of the problems in this, if you are a Christian business person, and unfortunately, a lot of Christian business people are cheated by their brothers by not paying the bills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sometimes I think those of us who are in located ministry, we could probably take advantage of others because we just assume, well, they're just going to do that for us for free. That's a wrong assumption. Because number one, they have to make a living as well. That's why they're in the business that they are. But I will say there are a number of people in this church who have businesses that I have reached out to because whether it's a plumbing issue, a construction issue, whatever, we have men and women in this church who have those abilities that I've gone to and say, hey, can you come and take a look at this? And they have. And sometimes they've been very generous, and I know they've knocked the bill down. And sometimes they haven't even charged me, even though I insist that I pay them because I'm not looking to take them for a ride. But and then thankfully there are those men and women who I've had in my home to do things or for my car that they charge me what they should. And I don't see that as an affront or wrong. But you're right, Ken. I think some of us, folks maybe like myself in leadership or just people in general, believers, can do that to one another. And that's wrong. And so we need to be responsible in those actions, in those transactions that happen.
And the laborer is worthy of his hire.
Yeah.
That comes to my mind scripturally.
And I want you to know this body of believers has been very generous to us laborers of hire here. They take care of us. They always have.
They want to.
And right. And they're just very generous and they want to. And we, Ben, Ryan, Peyton, Sam, all of us, we are so very thankful that we get to enjoy working in that regard. What is happening here, the problem is, Paul says, and it caused the problem in the first place with the whole thing with incest and stuff. They were abdicating their responsibilities as believers to judge things that happen. They were pushing that off to other folks. And Paul says, how dare you do that? How dare you, shirk your responsibility of what should be addressed here? You need to deal with this. When I read this first few verses of chapter 6, my mind harkens back to the Old Testament. And when there were problems with the children of Israel in those ancient days, they would send them, where would they send those people to go for justice? Where there was a certain place that they went.
To the gate.
to the gate of the city. You know, wherever they lived, that was where the leaders, the elders, the whoever they were called, that's where they were assembled, and that's where they were to take their problems of dispute with one another or whatever. And then those people, those leaders, those godly men made those decisions. And I think what Paul is saying here, you need to do that very same thing. I agree with Barb. I don't think it's a whole church gather people together and have everyone put in their 2 cents worth. I think that would cause more harm than good. But to bring these, you know, this to people who are trustworthy to decide, you know, what needs to happen among the church. Now, I can think of some reasons why Paul is saying, don't take it to a civil court. Don't go there. Why? What are some reasons why he says, don't do that?
It's a human court.
Okay, number one, it's a human court. Yes, good. Barb?
It airs the church's laundry, so to speak.
Yes, that's another one of them. You know, we take our dirty laundry to a place that it shouldn't go.
Exactly.
Did your parents ever say that to you about your family life and growing up and stuff?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd heard that in my home. You know, you don't talk about what we do here or whatever and air our dirty laundry. We handle it here. You know, it's sort of like, you know, kids will sometimes out their parents. And, you know, well, what do you mean we shouldn't take that, Mom or Dad? Because that's what we did at McDonald's last time, you know, or whatever. You know, sometimes your kids out you, and that's when you say, you know, we'll talk about this when we get home, you know, kind of a deal. But so don't air your dirty laundry. I'm amazed. I'm not on social media as much as I should be, but I am amazed what I hear that people put on social media. You know, the whole TMI stuff, and you know what people share there about relationships with other people, and you know how they've gone wrong and bad, and I don't like this person, and what, I don't know all of it, but you know, those kinds of things, I think that's similarly so. That's not the place where that should occur. So yeah, so you know, airing our dirty laundry is one, and we shouldn't be taking it to an outside court. I think what also happens, another reason why Paul says, don't you dare do this, is the disunity that it can cause within the church. You know, let's say Ben and I have a difference of opinion on something, and we become, you know, very vocal about it. And then pretty soon we have people in Ben's camp and we have people in my camp, and we are effectively dividing the church because, you know, this group says this and this group says that, and we have a faction going against each other. So, you know, and the pain that causes, you know, the body when stuff like that happens. You know, I mean, I've heard of it happening in other churches where that happens, and it leads to not things, distrust among leadership or distrust among believers with one another.
And it's such an embarrassment
Yeah.
for a church. I mean, it's an embarrassment to all Christians
Mhm.
everywhere if a church is having a situation like that.
Yeah.
And it makes unbelievers one more thing to
Yes.
criticize us for.
Yeah. You know, what makes them so different than us? I mean, this is happening outside in the world, and now it's happening within their church. Yeah, like, you know, why would I want to be a part of that?
Or why would I need to be a part of it? Like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, some people, do you agree with this statement or not? I think some people thrive on conflict.
Oh, yes.
I think some people look for it. Sandy told me that years ago, and I said, no, that's not what it's about. And then I watched that person's life through the years, and it seems like when there was an opportunity to do that, that's where they went. But I told Sandy, no, you don't know what you're talking about. Well, again, she was right. I was wrong. Barb,
Usual.
Should we,
as usual.
should we avoid suing anyone, even someone outside the church, even when, it's been done?
Our rights to do so, maybe.
Yes, even though we have legal rights to do so.
I think from what I understand in chapter 6, I think there's enough there to say, just back away from that. We might even have all kinds of grounds to stand on, but what is that going to do to the church? Because like in my situation, they see me as a leader within this church, and then I'm behaving that way. Is it going to bring ill repute on the body here because of my actions? Even though I may have every right by the court's standards to bring that, if I feel like it's going to bring disrepute not only on me but on the body, then I probably need to think twice about that. And that's hard, particularly if it involves a lot of money or something. I would think people think, well, wait, no, man, I'm getting mine. And so, yeah, I think another reason that Paul hints at here, not only the disunity it caused, not only us airing our dirty laundry, by us choosing to take something that should be handled within the church and taking it to a civil court, it gives the idea that we trust the judgment of unbelievers than we do of believers. That's just how you do it, and so we give that impression it happens. And I think the other thing that kind of goes along with what you said, Barb, desiring and pushing to have this settled in a court of law, maybe indicates that we're looking for vindication and saying I was right all along, and that we want that out there. We want a judgment so that people know I was right. You can behave that way. I know relationally in a marriage, you can be right, but man, that's the wrong way to go sometimes, about something. So yeah, you can be right all you want, but it doesn't help the relationship, and it certainly doesn't help the body. So anyway, I think those are 3 or 4 things that Paul says, how dare you bring this in front of a court? And he mentions, and maybe this is the first time that it's even been said in scripture, I don't know for sure. He says, you shouldn't abdicate this responsibility of judging, but then he says something that I think surprising. He says, because you're going to even judge angels. Now, where does that come from?
Yeah.
But apparently, once we get on the other side of heaven, that will be a responsibility that believers have. And now, to me, that seems
Also, because as folks deliver sermons, we have to make sure that we judge to make sure it's scriptural.
yeah. Judgment happens beyond just in those situations we're talking about. We need to make sure that what we're sharing or what we talk about up front, whether Ben is sharing something or Ryan or myself or whoever, that is not tainted with our opinion. I think that can happen pretty easily. When I first started Bible college years ago, our president of our Bible college at the first chapel, is that what they called them, Ben? Is that what they called them at Johnson Chapels? The college always preached the same sermon every year. And basically what he was warning us against is taking things out of context and saying, this is, this is, and matching it to our belief about something, but we would stand up there very piously and say, look at it, book, chapter, and verse, there it is, but taking it out of context in order to fit whatever, whatever Saul that we're on at that time, or whatever, preaching from the pulpit from a personal standpoint is. And so, yes, Ken, we need to be very careful by what we say, judging what is truth and not truth when we speak. Something else that I was reading as we consider this particular passage, what Paul is not talking about here, Paul is saying, he's not saying ignore criminal activity that's happening with your church and just deal with it in-house. In other words, like, I don't know what the right words, papering over or painting over a problem in your church and ignoring it. That comes from that is a criminal offense. And what I can think of, because we hear about it in the news a lot, that I can apply what I'm saying about that within the church, and not just in the church, but we've heard in recent years, like within the Catholic Church or whatever, in the abuse that has happened with young boys or kids or whatever, and how the impression I got was that it was kind of washed over, like this is no big deal. But what I want to say very quickly behind that, I am not jumping down on people who come from a Catholic tradition, because I think it can happen anywhere in other churches too.
Well, not to get too far astray from our verses, since I have Catholics in my family,
Mhm.
more and more Catholics would, for one reason or another, like the pool to draw young priests from, they'd be married.
Mhm.
And in taking a tour of a convent, the one at Ferdinand, which is a gorgeous place, the nun that took me on the tour said the same thing, that it's not going to be perfect, because Protestant ministers do things.
Yes,
But
yes.
she said, if priests were allowed to marry,
Mm.
it would certainly
Help that particular
that,
problem that's
yes.
happening within our body.
I think, and ultimately, it's about accountability, and that's something that we've seen a lack of in our American church here in the last 20 or 30 years, because a lot of stuff has come forward that we've seen happening. And I know a lot of churches and a lot of organizations that work with churches who want and care for the health of churches people are raising accountability for leaders, because we've tended to put especially when you've got a leader who can lead, not just hundreds, but thousands of people in a local congregation, we can just think, oh, there's no way they could do anything wrong. And so we kind of just give them a license to do whatever they need to do. And we don't really try to insulate them with accountability, right? Or that's what we've done in the last 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
And then we've seen it blow up in our face, where all this, like, you got guys right and left who just have inappropriate relationships, whether that be manipulative, or
Mhm.
whether it be sexual, or whether it be emotional, inappropriate relationships, or even the way that they lead their staff, at their churches. A lot of things have come forward where it's like,
money, church funds.
And so it's good to see healthy accountability within churches and organizations,
I think of two specific examples that Ben has addressed here that has happened within the church, and it too, like these, Paul's talking about something happening in the church between believers.